Good morning. Kia ora tātou. I'm Caroline Miller, and I'm consumer rep number 2. You have the handout, and I've deviated from that already, although in one way or another, hopefully, it will be covered. I'd just actually like to say, first of all, how amazing it is to be standing in a room of highly qualified people who are interested in and working at a very high level and improving the care of people with hip fractures. When I first had a hip fracture, I didn't let anybody call it that. My friends had to call it a femur fracture or a leg fracture because I had an understanding that a hip fracture meant the beginning of the end, and that's the end of life. And thanks to the work of people like you, that's a scenario that has clearly changed and is changing. And thank you very much for being involved in this work. So what I'm talking about is really a mixture of adding to some of Ngārangi's tips and just a few other suggestions about ways to go. But also in the context of bringing the person with the hip fracture back into the centre of the treatment rather than the hip being the centre of the treatment. And so I think that our contribution that we can make is from that point of view, from that aspect. Okay, so where is the hip patient in this picture? And I start with, we had very different experiences in very different hospitals. And starting with the care team, although we were in different hospitals, we had no idea that there was a team looking after us. Okay, so we knew there were lots of people who came and said hello to us and were incredibly helpful, and especially nurses and physios. But it would have been really good if somebody at the beginning had just said, there's a whole team of us, you won't see us all at once, but we compare notes, we have a plan about your treatment, and you can ask any of us about your care. I mean, it's a small thing, it just didn't happen. And similarly, I was discharged after 7 days in hospital, which felt dangerously early to me. Ngārangi, as she said, was in rehab, in hospital and rehab for 3 weeks. And so again, it would have been very helpful to have an idea of what needed to be achieved. You know, what was our route? What path were we on, and what had to happen? Because we now know there's a protocol, but we had no idea what it was. So tips that would be helpful. Now, Sarah's waved this booklet. Am I speaking loudly enough?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to know how many people use this booklet. Okay.
Shall we have a show of hands?
Yeah, there were 2, I think. Or 3 or 4. Okay, 5. All right, thank you. I want to do a big plug for this booklet. So this is published by the Health Quality and Safety Committee, published in 2022. Recovering from a hip fracture, it's got all kinds of information that a patient needs in it, but it isn't useful to give it to the patient. Okay? And I'm sure if you think about it, you can understand why. At what stage would you give it to them? At what stage are they ready to be able to read something and take in some information? And I'm going to point out some of the things that are in here and to suggest a way that I would like to see it used. So some people have mentioned on pages 2 and 3, there there are good diagrams of different kinds of hip fracture and different repairs of those. And people I know have been shown that by physios and have been very pleased to see, to begin to get an understanding of what's happened inside their own body. The booklet is also on page 9. There's a sign-off checklist that should be gone through with the patient before they're discharged from hospital, because they're really key things that the patient needs to know and needs to go through. Now again, if you just give that to a patient, they'll just tick everything off that reading, because they want to go home now, please. And so that's not a useful way to use that. I'm going to tell you a useful way to use it. And similarly, I'll come back to this where it contains some information about ACC. Now, what I would like to suggest with this booklet, that it's actually a role for an occupational therapist to take on with every hip patient who comes into hospital. How many occupational therapists are there in this room? Well, there's only one. Okay, I think that you are a key figure in the rehabilitation team for hip fracture, and I think that you're underutilised and underappreciated. And I would like to see more occupational therapists here, because I think this is an ideal booklet as the basis of a relationship for an OT to go through with the patient in hospital, and to go through that checklist and to sign off in the notes that they've gone through that checklist with the patient, and to be available to ask and answer questions to make sure that the patient is well prepared to go home and understands as much as they can understand that. Right, so represented. Pass it on. Okay. Now, I would suggest that sections of this are just gone through bit by bit with the OT. But I would also say, just going to the rehab experience, which I didn't have, and I'm forever envious about. I visited people in rehab, and my observation was that there was a lot of downtime, and I think Sarah's referred to that. And again, it seems to me that, at any one time, there are likely to be 3, 4, 5, 2 patients in rehab with a hip fracture. And it would be a great opportunity to get them together and to go through sections of this booklet with them. And it would also serve the purpose of breaking down some of the initial isolation, some of the initial depersonalisation that the person with hip fracture is experiencing, and the beginning of being able to share some experiences with other people who also have a hip fracture. So a number of purposes with that book, but excellent to use. Now, into the sort of general tips area. Point 4 was just about looking at the pain regime after discharge. I mean, there's a lot of tips again, but I wrote down date, time, and dose of pain relief that I took, and I think it would be good to suggest that to people, because I was very quickly aware that I wouldn't remember when I'd taken the last, whatever it was. Well, I was only taking codeine, and if I'd been taking anything heavier than that, I definitely wouldn't have remembered. So just having a plan for a pain regime would be good. Naomi mentioned things at home, so I'll jump over to point 6 and 7, which was when I got home from hospital, the equipment was there, very practical equipment that was very useful. What I didn't know was that after 6 weeks it was going to be taken away unless I asked to have it for longer. So again, just a little tip, it would be useful to know. You can apply for it to stay for longer, and it will stay for longer. But otherwise, someone arrives in a van and takes it away. And in terms of care and support, so that's the contracted care from agencies, like Genesis and so on. So absolutely essential. It's physically essential and it's psychologically essential. It's very practical, but it's somebody else coming in every day, somebody helping you care for yourself and caring for you. And also, it's a bit of socialisation, a bit of sociability. Now, I live alone and I live in a retirement village. And I want to pick up something that Sarah said. I think there might be an assumption that if you live in a retirement village and you go home from hospital, then there's some kind of care provided. There isn't. I live in an independent apartment. It's like living in a house in the middle of a forest or a field, okay? There is no care or interest provided. So I think that's a very important thing to find out from people and to be part of those statistics about rehab and ongoing care. And I was saying to someone earlier, because I haven't been in a rehab ward, within 24 hours of arriving home, I got stuck in a corner in my house. And I had to ring up a friend and say, I'm stuck in a corner. Could you please come help me get out of this corner? Yeah, I mean, I just couldn't figure what to move and how to get out of that corner. Now, I was, again, just trying to keep the picture of the person in a holistic way, and all these little things that come into our normal everyday life, and the loss of that sense of the person we are that goes with having a hip fracture, and how that can be restored. So thinking all the time about the restoration of that personhood as well. Now, in terms of a follow-up appointment, this was such amazing, clever surgery, and we're very grateful for that. And I wasn't offered a follow-up appointment. And I was astonished. I thought, how could somebody do something so clever and not want to know how it worked out? Of course they know how it works out. They do it all the time and it works. But, that was my initial thing. Like, why wouldn't they do such a great job and not want to know about it? But apparently this is a resource issue. So now I'll talk a bit about resources and perhaps some different use of resources. And so I thought, well, you don't have to have your follow-up with a surgeon, and you don't have to have it with the surgeon who did the surgery necessarily, but this could be a very good training exercise for a registrar, preferably one who's done an orthopaedic rotation. Doesn't need to know the patient, but would need to do some revision of the patient's notes, would need to know what you look for at a 6 to 8 week follow-up, and be able to answer some questions from the patient. So I think this is a really good revision opportunity for a registrar. Rather than saying we don't have the resources, it would be doing them a favour, maybe, to get them doing their orthopaedic revision. I haven't talked about ACC. And I just want to come back to this dark booklet. On page 7 in the booklet, there's, again, you know, if you were sitting with someone and able to talk this through, there's a short list of what ACC can provide, and particularly around physio. Now, ACC is a tremendous resource that we have, and they can help with all kinds of things. But they will only give you that thing if you ask for it. So you need to know what it is that they've got that you could have. And again, very important information for the person to know leaving hospital. Also, that currently 3 years ago, there was a 2-week delay. So we were given an interim number, and then we rang ACC and got a proper number, and that didn't come through until 2 weeks after discharge from hospital, and then we could start to liaise with ACC. I think that could be pushed back. I think that time scale could be pushed back. Okay, so one other idea, I'm almost at the end, is around psychological support. And I've just got to find the right piece of paper. So again, this booklet, this undervalued, unloved, unused booklet for all you caring people. This started with a focus group meeting run by the Health Quality Standards and Jigs. They got together a group of people in Auckland who all had experience of hip fracture, and asked them questions about this too, and showed them that prototype of a booklet, etc., of what would be helpful. It was absolutely astonishing to be in that room with so many people who had a hip fracture or experience of a hip fracture, because it might have been a carer. And 1 or 2 people who are in this room were there. The noise level, it just went whoosh. Everybody wanted to talk about their hip fracture. Everybody wanted to talk to somebody else who had a hip fracture. So the obvious follow-on, apart from the great booklet, this great booklet, was support groups. So I went home and I looked up support groups, and there aren't any. And obviously this is another resource issue. And so I just want to quickly say, because this is a very embryonic idea, that I then started thinking, okay, if we could get some academics involved who are training anybody in the health sciences, this could be, and a bit of funding from somewhere, this could be a topic for a master's dissertation for someone in the health sciences. And it could be like a rolling series, building on each other, setting up, funding, running a support group for hip fracture. Now, that's the very beginning of the idea. I've made some other investigations, but if there's anybody in this room who has access to money and who has access to students in the health sciences who might be interested in doing some master's level research which would lead on to other things, I'd be really interested to talk to you, because I think that's the next big area, is really looking at the psychological needs of patients with hip fracture, and probably support groups which give them that, and some socialisation. And now I've talked for too long, I think. But, so thank you very much for your attention, and again, thank you very much for all that you do, and keep doing it with great enthusiasm. It makes a real difference. Thank you very much.